What are you doing, beloved?
Attention, attention, my black brothers. What I want y'all to do right now is take out the do-rag, the silky, tie it down. I want to see the waves glistening. If you got nappy hair, pick it. Don't let nobody discourage you.
Ariel.
Black boys, black boys.
It's so interesting because, I think, and I think about this a lot, about like the capacity to dream, about who gets to dream. And I mean, and for that reason, I do also really enjoy the youth because of their fearlessness. And the way it's always explained to me, especially in sometimes in therapy, is that like, the frontal cortex hasn't been developed. And so the dreaming and the fearlessness is a function of that, like, lack of control. But that the world definitely beats it out of you, right? Like those structures absolutely beat it out of people. But
if you let them.
But then there's this push, and I have definitely received it from people, from Black people, to unlearn, to throw away the childishness or the liberation of dreaming, to throw that away for survival. No, just for survival. That you have to throw that away. You have to completely abandon the ability to dream to survive.
Right. I accept that if the goal is to survive. However, my family, my ancestors, our people have not given their lives. We haven't built this country for free to survive. I'm talking about thriving.
Thank you.
So this is why therapy is interesting to me, right? Therapy exists and it's also why I hate when people ask me questions about like, what does self-care look like for you? It doesn't. I don't have self-care. I got all kind of things that I am happy to talk about, like not sleeping because I want other people to do better and be better. But one of the trappings around therapy is that like it again exists as an institution in this country, primarily designed for white people. Yeah. And so often we get to go to therapy and the goal, the best thing we can hope for is to adopt a couple of literal coping mechanisms to show up in white people's shit.
Correct.
Tell me, therapist, what I can do, how I can breathe, how I can count, what I can imagine, what pictures I can paint in my mind so that I don't cuss this white person out when they show up in their goddamn privilege and act in oppressive ass ways.
Correct.
I no longer care about that as a goal. It is important. I'm not saying it's not. But while I am here trying to hold on to my oxygen mask in this moment of emergency, the work of supporting other people in my roles is about getting us to thrive. And thriving requires dreaming. It requires you imagining what you need free from white people and their shit.
Oh man, that resonated.
And again, I go back to even language in this regard. Too much of what it is that we think about and how we game things out or what we think is possible is based on what has been. And one of the things that I appreciate having learned as a kindergarten teacher is that which has been at some point once was, and for that reason alone, doesn't always have to be. Mm-hmm. And we get caught up too often in the, well, it's too hard, or that's what this person did that, and it only resulted in that. All of the incremental change is change. And we have to be fearless in demanding the ability to dream.
I think the issue that I have had with that, because I think I'm a rebel by nature, and there's this instinct in me to push back, to push the envelope. I had this conversation with my mother recently. But I mean, being branded idealistic, being branded naive for those reasons. And then having to try to reconcile that, right? Because I still live in a very material world. And so I exist as this person who wants to go out, who wants to push the envelope, and I do in my own ways. But then still being held back a little bit by the material and by our current realities. And it is difficult to reconcile those two.
I'm going to push you though, and you tell me when this gets to be too much given the time constraints that I'm completely unaware of and oblivious to. When I hear you say material, I'm thinking that you're talking about the financial benefits associated with doing things that either white people dictate or heteronormativity suggests. And that's very different than existing in a world where we, the three of us in this moment, have privileges that people have sacrificed for. And I'm saying to you that I'm certain, in the same way that I used to ask myself if James Baldwin could have been a self-serving attorney and didn't have to worry about the pressures and trappings of calling out white supremacy and anti-Blackness, would he have done it? For me, the answer is probably, but he couldn't. That wasn't his lot in life. That's not what he was purposed to do. And we now have the ability to be very much engaged in social justice work and live comfortably too. So I'm trying to ask you, where's the tension?
I think it's about, so there are things like, for instance, in my current role, where things I want to push back against, right? But then the material being that the very real hierarchy of being in any organization, or not any of them, because not all of them do it, but being in an organization that has a hierarchy.
You just answered the question and go somewhere else. If that's not the place, right? This is what I'm saying. Like sometimes, again, we make things. This is why I think, again, like I miss being around kids, because adults, like we talk we can read another book, consult another study. You just answered your own question, which is it's not all of them. So that's not the place for you to be, boo.
Yeah. We'll leave it right there.
Oh my damn! I know me. I'm self-conscious. I am very.
All of us are. We were taught to be
in my head. So I think I realistically did not know how to consume everything that was happening around me. I think that was something I was seeing what was happening with protesters. I was seeing what was happening in our society. I was seeing that there wasn't change happening. And I was not saying that I believe that this shit was going.
What do you mean when you say I saw that there was not change happening?
No, I just was seeing like with the policies, it was taking forever for things to like be implemented. Like we are still protesting to this day, and I was just like, why are we still why do we still have to protest for us to demand change? And this.
So do you believe that there's a point in time in which that will not be what we have to do?
I would hope so, but
based on what?
I just believe that we should understand what is right and what is wrong. I think that we should be in a space sometimes with our like policies, like when we see that some shit is going down that's wrong, why do we have to band together for somebody to actually realize that this shit is wrong? I think that's what my mindset is. But
okay, let's stay in this space for a second. And a part of me thinks that this is really important because I want us as Black people and Black queer people, for the three of us as Black queer men, to disabuse ourselves of thinking we have to carry the weight of things that we don't have to bear. There is not a single society that exists where the community always acts in agreement, where there is true equity or equality, that we know of, right? Like it might exist in the world, right? There might be some, what we contemporarily refer to as indigenous or native community that is not affected by white supremacy and the project of capitalism. But the nature of being in community with people, especially large, diverse communities like our country, requires this process of ongoing struggle. I am not saying, and I'm clearly not signing up for Black people continuing to bear the disproportionate share of the weight of that struggle. But I do think that sometimes we feel things that we don't have to feel because we say to ourselves that like, there's gonna come a point in time in which we're gonna all hold hands and sing songs together. That shit only exists in children's books. Mm-hmm. The reality is that policies are lagging indicators, right? I'll often say this to talented Black kids who are told that the only way to be successful and make a difference in the world is to go to law school. Yeah. The law is a lagging indicator, right? Like, laws are designed to preserve precedent, not to be radical vehicles for change. And I say that to say that, right, like the policy is what you point to when people aren't doing the shit that they otherwise should be doing. And so we should, to your point, and I think what I heard you say is your struggles, we should always accept that it is always going to be necessary to leverage policies in order to help police behaviors. Mm-hmm. Because that's required in a pluralistic society, especially one that is informed by structural racism, white supremacy, and anti-Blackness. Secondarily, this struggle, and I say this to you, like fully acknowledging the weight of feeling like where you were at points in time, including last week. Mm-hmm. The struggle for the kind of equality that would allow us to sleep at night peacefully, to get the kind of rest I imagine that white people get, because I've never had it in my lifetime, is a struggle that most of us will commit our lives to. Yeah. It is one that the people that we celebrate and we call their names in February and June and around moments of crisis gave their lives for. And I wonder sometimes now in these moments when like the shit gets like heavy, and I appreciate being at a Black organization where we ain't got to worry about white people's feelings.
Yep.
Sometimes I call us all out Black, right? But then there's also the like, sometimes we don't get to do that. We need to be there in that moment for a particular reason. We have to be thoughtful about the weight that we carry such that we can continue to show up. Our literal existence is an act of defiance in this world that we show up in. And if we close off the possibility of us being able to shift and maneuver, then there's no reason to really engage. And I say that again to say that like the thing that people should celebrate, if nothing else, and again, I want to honor that like there are people that have died. There are families that are mourning right now. I literally went to a service earlier this week with Emerald Gardner, right? To honor Eric Gardner, who if laws had been changed to honor the way that he died, George Floyd would not have died recently. And we are here. But the process of cities like Minneapolis and Houston and Los Angeles, where I'm from, changing policies in days or weeks in ways that they otherwise have told communities this requires a study and a year and a this and that is significant. And if you have nothing else to hold on to, hold on to that.
So I wanted to, I'm glad you know, both of you, I'm glad you guys brought up this topic of legislation because so much of the argument since the protests have started has been voting versus
since the post-COVID protests have started. Because remember a Black gay man, Black same-gender-loving man, my friend Marcus Hunter, Dr. Marcus Anthony Hunter at UCLA, was the first person to use the term Black Lives Matter. Shortly thereafter, 3 Black women, 2 of whom identify as queer, if my memory serves me correctly, popularized it. And they were able to do that because there had been, before and during that point, sustained community organizing and agitation and calls for the same things we're discussing now. All of that stuff existed. And remember, before COVID, Black Lives Matter was a taboo thing.
Yeah.
People weren't trying to wear it to Starbucks and donating as a result of it. This post-COVID reincarnation of BLM is something that we have to acknowledge is the most recent version of a protracted struggle, to go back to the point that we were previously making.
I've noticed that people, and they did this in 2015 as well, have posed protesting and voting. They've put them against each other. And for the sake of having my hand in any pot that exists, honestly, I've actually seen a lot of Black people having that argument. And honestly, even at a protest in DC, there was a man in the conductor hat. I'm pretty sure he was just causing a disruption for the sake of doing it. And he had argued with a couple of the people at the protest about the importance of voting. Why are y'all out here protesting? He also was asking why we were destroying the city, which I don't have a qualm about. Because last time I checked, I didn't see anybody's communities actually being destroyed.
As long as we met white anarchists, then we're fine based on actual evidence, but keep going.
And so I saw people saying, voting is how you do it. And he did that. And when he did it at the protest, actually, it had taken a lot of the attention away from what we were there for. And that was like the opposition to the actual state. And I did both so that I could say I did both, right? So I can say I did everything that I could do in the moment to try to affect change. But what do we do to stop that conversation, or at least to add some nuance to it? Because I don't like the idea that voting is the end-all be-all, especially when we can see, I didn't elect Donald Trump. And by popular vote, I don't think the country did either. So I need us to be able to transform that conversation, and I haven't been able to think of any ways to do that.
Yeah,
and
I'm trying to help. Yeah. I'll try and help. One is, yes, you are right. Donald Trump, Bleach Boy, who shall no longer be named, did not win the popular vote. He benefited from the Electoral College. Again, one of the things that white people did to ensure that they could benefit from privilege.
Right.
I think it's important to celebrate again. I mentioned his name, Freeman Hrabowski, the president of UMBC. This man has developed a program, the Morehouse Scholars Program, that is responsible for producing the most Black and other non-white people of color who get MD PhDs in hard sciences out of any institution in the country. He says we should be liberated from the tyranny of either or by the beauty of both and.
Thank you.
And the struggle for me is, again, language, again, it's by design. That's why people often try and force you to pick pink or blue, boy or girl, white or black, gay or straight, because it's seemingly simple, but in the flattening of things that are otherwise complex, you miss these important nuances. And so not only is it important for me to say that it is true that voting is important, because it is, protesting is important, and it is, that there are other ways for people to be engaged in the civic opportunities for us to ensure that our elected and appointed officials do the job that they're supposed to be doing.
Right.
Acknowledging that, I also understand and appreciate and accept as a part of my responsibility the need to help people understand or really feel that if they're going to vote in the way in which some people do, that it's going to matter. Right? I even think about just this past week. We live in a country where we know, like, there are well-meaning white people who talk about this shit on every news channel, every fucking night, about how this entire administration is literally stealing elections.
Yeah.
Bleach Boy's son has a direct relationship with the company that put the voting machines in Georgia that led to Black people and other people who were more inclined to vote for a Democratic candidate or anyone other than the person who was deciding to not lead, right? Like, yeah. I can get into even if I want to suspend all of my other political beliefs, what we all know and should be able to agree upon in this moment is that he is deciding not to lead.
Correct.
Those connections are clear. And in this moment, they are resulting in people, like earlier this week, waiting in Georgia for hours to vote if it meant that they weren't going to roll up someplace and vote for a person who continues to benefit from being mediocre in this world at best and a whole lot of privilege.
Ooh.
We, those who continue to say to people voting is important, that every election is the most important election, and that this is the most important thing that anybody will do in their lifetime, have a responsibility to ensure right now at a minimum two things. One is that people should not have to choose their safety, literally have to risk their lives in order to vote.
Yeah. Mm.
You should not have to do that. It's one of the reasons why there are so many states that are implementing all kinds of measures and processes to give people opportunities to vote by mail, or to be able to drive up to a polling place and have a poll worker come to their car, or otherwise account for all of the things that we should be accounting for given the fact that we're living in a global pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And voting in and of itself is not enough.
Thank you.
So we also have to hold people accountable before, during, and after they're elected. We have to not just focus on, and some of this is going to be preaching to the choir, I will acknowledge that. Hey, Saints. We also have to vote not just in a presidential election cycle, but vote down ballot. I spend so much of my time now saying less about Bleach Boy, in part because so many of my colleagues, we're trained to have conversations about political cycles and like the things you normally say when things are going on. But if there's something I know about now, it's not normal. And I accept that. Normal didn't work for us. It didn't work for Black people. It didn't work for Black queer people. I don't want to go back to normal. I tell people that all the time now. And I only really care about ensuring that Bleach Boy is not in office.
Yeah.
Notwithstanding, my work is really in ensuring that people understand that so many of the things that we are vexed by now, right? The people who have the ability to ensure that, like, a thug in a uniform and a badge can't kill you with a sense of impunity, that you have access to early care and education programs in public schools that actually feed your soul, that acknowledge you as a human, right? the people that have the ability to invest in the kind of social services, including mental health support and child welfare managers and people that can make critical workforce connections, right? Like, the president is important. Federal elected officials are important. And we need to do a better job of thinking about mayors, about district attorneys, about police chiefs and sheriff's officials, and about school board members, people that literally often just get to walk into those positions because we aren't paying attention.
Yeah.
And my hope is that, you know, you mentioned in phrasing this question, the man in the hat who I imagine is not Black, who was distracting. We all have to be clear that distractions are strategic.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Just this week, I read Twitter deleted some 50,000, I might be off on the math, but a ridiculous number of accounts that were created by Chinese-controlled bots, designed to confuse people, offer up mixed messages. There are deep fakes and other things that are going on using data and AI. All this stuff is by design, right? In the same way that this administration is appointing judges at a rapid pace and instituting policy changes that aren't being acknowledged. Just this week, this administration changed policies that will allow people to hunt animals in Alaska that are fucking extinct. They get more love than most Black men on a regular day.
Wow.
And nobody's talking about it because the world is literally on fire.
Yeah.
And to my earlier point, that's not new. They had been doing this since day one. The fact that Brett Kavanaugh is sitting on a bench that he will live the rest of his life out on should continue to concern us, but nobody's talking about that now because we have distractions to deal with.
It's a lot of them. It's a lot.
But her emails, right? Like, this stuff will continue to happen, and we have to be wise about how we engage in it.
It's been so hard, though. I think, and because I'm aware of these distractions, and it only just recently hit me that they've been going on for like a lot of time. And that each year there's more of them, and that each year we get so invested in things that are completely unimportant. I recently stopped watching reality TV for this very reason. As much as I enjoyed it,
I'm gonna push back against that, but we'll come back to it.
Well, the thing was, I started to realize that so much of my mind was so invested in this thing and how this was working that I stopped paying attention to how we interact with each other and our desire to stand up for one another. So one of the things that I'm seeing right now is like we're getting really violent toward each other, and
always have been. Again, white supremacy.
Super embedded in us, and this is collectively to attack one another. And so this is why I brought up reality TV, right? Because I feel like we're absorbing some of that from the television, and I'm just curious how we're supposed to get people refocused on things that are important to them, even if they're going to continue watching reality TV. Because I'm not
the lies that people tell. Let me say this. I would submit to you that this is a part of the function of white supremacy, and I mean that literally. We are entitled to find joy wherever we can find it. If that is a GIF, if it's a trap song, if it's you smoking with your friends, if it's playing spades and talking shit, like whatever it is, you are entitled to do it with your Black self. And I think that often what we're responding to when we have these conversations about denying the things that give us joy and pleasure and that otherwise vex us, right? Like the process of learning and exploring and doing all of this it requires us to be uncomfortable. Like all of it's not going to be easy. It's not supposed to be. But I worry that too often we think to ourselves that we have to present a certain image in order to appease the politics of respectability.
I think that
what I know about.
I think that I definitely battle with is that trying to appease this thing, or I'm a person that's I feel like I should have to cancel something because or I shouldn't divulge in something because of others
or indulge in it because somebody said you shouldn't, which is why I love being able to work for still my president Barack Hussein Obama and tell people I got Ivy League degrees and I'm a connoisseur of ratchet TV.
Yes.
Which was meaningful for two reasons, and I'll tell you in real time. I didn't get fired, but I had a really tough conversation around the time that I appeared on an episode of Real Housewives. I have a relationship with Phaedra Parks. Don't nobody say shit about her around me. That's my friend. I fight and I got bail money. And before I met Phaedra, we were connected through a mutual friend who is concerned about our babies. I understood that Phaedra was going to do something for Black boys. Her then husband at the time, Apollo, was about to be arrested, state-sanctioned violence. We can come back to that, intentional. She has 2 Black boys she's raising, and she was going to do something connected to them. And at the time, the Obama administration was rolling out My Brother's Keeper. I care a lot about our babies. And so it was, of course, I was going to talk to her. Why this was concerning is because I worked for our still first Black president. While Bill Clinton was cool, he was not Black. Y'all need to stop saying that. And there were a lot of concerns about what it meant for the administration to be associated with a reality brand, and in particular, the Real Housewives franchise. The reality is this, to talk about reality TV. I spent 280 days of my first year in the administration on the road. Not with my sister when she birthed my niece, with my friends when they got married, not with my family when they buried loved ones, invested in the work.
Yeah.
And in 20 seconds on a reality TV show that has a global audience, I was able to talk about the things that I care most about in ways that I was not able to do spending almost an entire year on the road doing my job. Those platforms exist for a reason. Consider 2 things. I usually do it as a question when I'm talking. But after The Cosby Show and Family Matters and so many of the shows that y'all might even be too young to remember, the only representation of a Black man as a father on TV was T.I. on a reality show.
Yeah.
Those are spaces where we get to exist and show up outside of the stereotypes that we are trapped in on nightly news, or when Bleach Boy is talking about us from the White House. Secondarily, as it relates to Black queer people, I know more Black queer people in relationships. I was about to say healthy, but we can come back to that on another episode. In relationships based on reality TV than I do my real life. And so I want us to get away from throwing away the things that give us joy because they might make white people uncomfortable or make us feel uncomfortable in the presence of white people. Fuck them and how they feel.
Well, it wasn't so much about that, right? But because I told Devery this, my reason for setting that aside was because it was legitimately making me feel awful.
Then
Like,
get that away.
Right.
Yeah, don't do something that doesn't give you joy. But and also celebrate that, like, Cynthia Bailey just was asked a question on the reunion of the Real Housewives of Atlanta about her daughter Noelle and her partner.
Okay.
Who was at Howard University,
Right.
who was a bison, who was a Black girl, right? Think about the fact that Mimi's spouse and Ty are allowing people to talk about Black lesbians, not connected to this myth of lesbians always wearing flannel and being white women that wear Black glasses and rainbow wigs, right? Like, I'm not saying that it's always the thing that we want to laud and celebrate in the way that we do Barack and Michelle, but it is a part of who we are.
Yeah, because I certainly don't subscribe to respectability. And I'm not at all concerned about the representation, like the issues of representation for Black people on these shows, but rather how they impact our relationships with each other. And that was sort of my concern, or what has been my concern, taking a step back.
So I would also lean into the reality that, and let's go to Shawnee O'Neal. And thank you for your services.
Yeah.
Those relationships also include, in many cases, women, Black women, having financial support and entrepreneurial opportunities that they otherwise might not have had. Okay. And so in the same way that on the surface, these conversations are usually about us throwing glasses and having fights that people have, right? To go back to a conversation George and I had, like, we all go through shit. I watch Ozark because I'm like, I love watching white people go through their shit in public, because often it's our pain that is on display. Let's not, like, lie to ourselves and suggest that that's not true. Again, as a grown-ass man, I appreciate that I'm not fighting with my friends like that. I'm also not getting those bags. There are trade-offs to go to the earlier point. But let's celebrate all of it.
I'll take that.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to the, like, Black Lives Matter movement and more so talk about, like, how do we think that corporate inclusion right now is like taken away from the credibility of the Black Lives Matter movement. We are seeing so many organizations posting, Black Lives Matter or things of that nature. Just thinking.
So I'm gonna play this Jay-Z's moment of truth is now starting to play in my head. So let's lean in. We're gonna have a family conversation in public in the same way that people on reality TV do, where they're like, don't nobody know, but this is gonna be aired to millions of people. I'm gonna speak that into existence. So the reality is that we live in a capitalist society, and the relationship between corporate profits and protest struggles will continue to be inextricably linked. It's why there are court cases now around the ability for corporations to contribute to campaigns. It is now why there is rather an intentional focus on prohibiting police unions from being able to influence politics. It is a part of our American DNA. What is also important for me to say as a leader of a national civil rights organization that has relationships with corporations is that we benefit from the resources, and we should, in part because those corporations have profited from our labor and our pain.
Yeah.
The question for me that we should be asking in this moment is, what does it look like for a company to purport to stand in solidarity with people? And in particular, in this moment with Black lives, when they don't really mean it.
It's a lot of that.
And the example for me, it's a whole lot of that. I spent more time than I care to account for in this moment thinking about Starbucks on today.
Yeah, and they
because this is
answered what they said too. They're like, "Oh no, we're going to let you all wear."
But let's, before you even get to the recanting, let's sit in what actually happened for people who might be unfamiliar.
Right.
Yeah.
It is June. It's 1 month and 2 years to the date when Starbucks closed their companies in selected states because 2 brothers were arrested for less than $10.
Yep.
So if we're going to apologize for stuff, we should still be apologizing for that. Let's just move past that for the sake of brevity. So Starbucks is a company based in Seattle, Washington, that has made it a policy to not only celebrate pride, white pride, white LGBTQ equality by producing pride cups that change color and got glitter in them, things that I don't like as a Black, same-gender loving man, encouraging or at least allowing their baristas to celebrate and acknowledge pride in the ways in which they find comfort in. And they made a conscious decision to say to people right now, while parts of the world are literally on fire, that you cannot be political when it comes to Black lives. And so I say to myself, as a Black customer who walks into that space, every time I do, both equally proud of being Black and same gender loving, what the fuck were you thinking when you supported both a policy and a practice that suggested that I'm okay when I decide in June to wear the t-shirt you give me that has a rainbow on it because it's about queer people being able to claim liberation and feel free. And I can't do anything to also acknowledge that that same liberation and freedom is anchored in a movement often led by Black and Black queer people who still in this moment are not free.
Yeah.
And so I don't even want to discuss the apology. Too little, too goddamn late. What I want to discuss is why there are so many corporations who continue to have C-suites that allow them to have, there were conversations before this policy was rolled out. There were conversations before the email was leaked. Why people continue to decide to privilege white people's feelings and tears over literal Black bodies vexes me.
Yeah.
And if there's a conversation to be had about corporations right now, it's, are you prepared to be called out? There's a time for calling in and calling in with love. This ain't it.
Not
while our pain is on display.
It's no reason for it.
No, not during Pride Month. Marsha P's Miss Major wouldn't allow for that.
But on the next.
So are you accountable And I don't even like that analogy. It pisses me off when I see law enforcement officers now doing that as a sign of deference for people that they're burying. But if that hadn't happened, they would be alive. These babies wouldn't have to be in the middle of Times Square talking about their parents having changed the world, because they could have them to be there for them. Like the trade-offs just don't make sense to me.
No.
And so if there's a conversation to be had, is, are you ready to be held accountable?
Yeah, I think, that's the true conversation. Like, what are you going to do now? Like,
Yeah, because I mean, they're going to be involved, right? And the reality is that, like, there are, again, privilege, relative. I have the ability now to say no to folks, to vet folks. You ain't about this. You ain't been in it. We don't. This ain't a relationship that really feels comfortable. There are some members. There are some people in our community that don't have that luxury.
Yeah.
Right. There are studies that talk about why white men who, I just keep going back to, again, the violence that Black trans women are often forced to experience and gender nonconforming people experience in silence, right? There's data that talks about white men who perform drag and do everything but experience what life is like as a trans person because they have the benefit of white privilege. That's also different for Asian people who get the benefit of being celebrated both abroad and here for having features that are much closer to being European, to looking like white folks in all the ways that they like to be celebrated. But it's Black folks who, to be clear, people will trip over themselves to pay for a Lizzo concert ticket or to get their hair to look like Beyonce's. But when it comes to loving on us in real time, refuse to do it. And if they do it, it's often in darkness, in alleys, after midnight, under the cone of darkness. Like, if nothing else, we have to be clear about all of that and how and why these things work, so that we can not only maneuver better through them, but also like be clear about these distractions so that we don't have to expend time dealing with them, are carrying weight that is purpose to keep us from doing the stuff we're supposed to be doing, which for me includes thriving and dreaming and being free.
That reminds me a lot of my friend Miles E. Johnson. That's a lot of what I think he's really done. He's inspired me to get back to a space of really doing that, of really prioritizing thriving and prioritizing dreaming, and also just like really getting back in touch with my connection to spirit and acknowledging and relying on ancestors, which honestly, since I started that journey, I felt a lot more secure in my journey, honestly. Coping is a lot easier since I've gotten more in tune with that. I wanted to ask you about media outlets. If you've noticed, if this is a real thing, that they don't use the term Black people, that it's often like people of color, or like it's just never an acknowledgement of the word Black or the phrase Black people. And it seems to be like an anti-Black thing for a lot of people who have a platform.
Yes.
Why? Like, why not just say
anti-Blackness?
Because I hear what's the consequence, right? So what is then the consequence?
The consequence of naming things is that you make them real. That's why Adiala says, "Name a thing, beloved." If again, I go, this ain't me. This Patricia Hill Collins, Kimberly Crenshaw. White supremacy exists in almost everything. It is all up and through how we're even having this conversation. It exists in signs, systems, and symbols that create it, make it legitimate, and also make it disappear at the same time.
Yeah.
And so it's a lot harder to deal with white supremacy if you don't name it white supremacy, which is why white folks are quick to say, can we call it diversity training? Can we maybe not mention the very thing we need to mention in order to get to the root problem? That's by design. It's why I wrote an op-ed, time runs together, 2 weeks ago, imploring everybody to understand that like the well-meaning messages that come from white people that are like, how are you? I've been thinking about you in this moment of extreme crisis. What can I do to be helpful?
I'm not telling you no more.
So here's my thing.
With that.
Let's words matter. You said, I'm not telling you no more.
Mm-hmm.
The two things in that to me are, I've been telling you, and in this moment, I'm gonna make a conscious decision not to. And I wanna highlight the ways that white supremacy works. One, it works in demanding free labor of us, which is you acknowledging that you always do the work anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever they send a message, you feel obligated for whatever reason, often well-intended and often by design. We do the work. The second thing is you saying not in this moment, not no more, which is something that a whole lot of people struggle with. Being an emissary, because we sometimes feel like, well, if we don't give it to them, they're not going to do it.
Yeah.
And they're in a position of privilege, so they don't have to do it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, what happens is three things. One is them reaching out, especially in moments of crisis, because if they had the kind of relationship that we should always have, we would have been talking.
Yeah.
We would have been in dialogue. You would have known what was going on. You would have been woke. This wouldn't have been no new shit.
Yeah.
And so in this moment, I want you to sit with why we don't have that kind of relationship. That's you, boo. I've been here. Ain't going nowhere.
Yeah.
So you sit with it too. It's a request for the Cliff Notes version of how not to be a racist.
Google that shit. You can do research, you can read, I understand, but you want to go.
And that takes me to my third point, which is this. One, y'all don't really need us. Yeah. White folks didn't consult us. I refuse to believe. White folks didn't consult us when they came up with transatlantic enslavement.
No.
White folks, I want to know the Black person they consulted who told them to count 3/5 of us when it was to their political benefit.
Yeah.
I even want to know the Black person that signed up for selling affirmative action or the politics of respectability as a thing that would allow us to pull ourselves up by bootstraps, something that is physically impossible, but that conservatives like to tell other people because they've been drinking this Kool-Aid. Hashtag get out.
Google is free.
Not only is it free, the ability to do the fucking work is free. It's labor that they can and should do for themselves. So here's my last point. Amanda Seales said this while on her trampoline. I'm still jealous about it. I know a whole lot about a whole lot of people's cultures. In the same way that I speak multiple languages, I understand gang signs because it was a part of safety. There are a lot of things that I've had to do simply by way of showing up in the world. I know a whole lot about right now the Holocaust and the experience of Jewish people as a result of Nazi regimes and people that showed up in the world before Bleach Boy did with similar xenophobic beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have to be required to learn that knowledge. I didn't have to ask people what I should do. I figured it out. And the same is true for privileged white people that have the luxury of not having to be beaten in the streets or have labor requested of them for free to do this work. And so I want us again to be clear about all of the ways that white supremacy, anti-Blackness, and these systems of oppression are always at work so we can be most strategic in how it is that we thrive and otherwise get free. The other thing I was going to say is, Devin, you made a point about I feel more comfortable, not your words, mine, in community. And there's an African proverb that talks about like how much further we can go when we realize that we shouldn't be going alone. I don't know a single person that's successful that's done that shit by themselves. That's a lie that white people tell often when they're giving interviews.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, I go back to before this connected, I had a conversation with our ancestors. I got James Baldwin sitting over here, sitting looking at me. I got brother Malcolm sitting right here. Malcolm sitting right here. I got Martin sitting on a wood plaque. I got Barack Obama sitting right here. I got a couple of queer women sitting in this place too, so don't nobody think that I'm a misogynist in this place who's not a real Black feminist. We have conversations. I take baths and talk with my ancestors because we are not supposed to do this by ourselves. Alone.
Right.
And us thinking that we can, us thinking that if we are the only one in the room, if we are the best friend of the person in the position of authority, that's how white supremacy wins.
Yeah. Damn.
I wanna start to close out because I know we could talk about this for as long as we want. I appreciate you for being able
how the ancestors work, as Amanda Seales.
I see. Oh,
but I wanted to like you still honor your time and make whatever you have to do. I don't want to just keep us on here for as long as we can go because we can go all day. But last thing I want to know is what resources do you go to, or what things can others that want to follow what you are
I'm gonna grab one. Keep going.
Oh, what you are looking to and resources of that nature that help you stay hungry and stay passionate about Black Lives Matter or just Queer Lives Matter or just Black people in general. And that's, whew. I'm like, yeah, I'm just taking all this information in. I really appreciate this.
So enlightening. I really have enjoyed it.
We're learning. First of all, I appreciate everybody that is listening to the show right now. This is special edition, I'm gonna say, because usually we don't go this long. I think we're probably about to hit like 2 hours or something. But
good for me.
but we do appreciate that.
So it took me longer than I thought, but I was trying to find, this is really important for me. This is a figurine that I brought back with me from Austin, Texas, in January when I buried my grandfather. And he was a Baptist preacher. He preached almost up until he passed. He also was a registered gun owner, which I think is important as we think a lot about what's going on now in the Second Amendment. And I wanted to grab this because I think it is important for us to have reminders of who we are and whose we are, because we exist in a world that by design tells us that we should not love ourselves and feel worthy of acknowledging that the price for our crown has already been paid for. Similarly, remembering that we are connected to people, I'm often turning to the literal words of people that have been through these struggles before us and who have been bold enough to write down their reflections, experiences, anxieties, and fears. So for folks that can't see, because I hope y'all know I shared this video. Well, I should have asked y'all before that. Y'all gonna share this video?
Yeah, we can share. Yeah, we can share the video. Yes.
Oh, Lord.
I recorded on Zoom as well.
I should have asked that earlier. But yeah, I'm holding up books for those who won't see the video of Frederick Douglass, James Baldwin, Jimmy, my Uncle Jimmy, and Du Bois. And then similarly, my last thing is to get a tribe, right? So I grabbed some books from people who I know and love, who are at present writing stories that we otherwise should be consuming. This last one is from Marcus Hunter, who again I mentioned is the first person that we know based on data to use Black Lives Matter. Brittany Cooper, Charlene, Carruthers, other people have contributed to this canon. But just don't feel like you got to go with this alone.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
No, thank y'all. Thank y'all for what you're doing.
Yeah.
What you're working through.
We appreciate you being a part of this episode with us. This is one of, I think, by far the most insightful guest or conversation that we've had on the show. And I think this is definitely a step in where our content can go and how we can evolve in this space. I know me personally, I was all ears. I was learning and regurgitating so many things because that's how I learn, is to shut up and just like, what is happening, and also doing my own work outside of it. But I think this is one thing I really appreciated in this space, is being able to just absorb everything that you was telling me. So I really appreciate that. Devin, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, I'm gonna continue to consume your content because I think I heard some things today that were really affirming that I have not heard in other spaces.
Like what?
Mostly like the acknowledgement of this sort of, and I want to call it radical because I don't see it as often as I do, but just like really being honest, right? Speaking truth to power and doing so in a way that like prepares you for the consequences and stepping into fear for it. Because I want to do it, and I often want to do it, but then I battle with my conditioning about it, and then it feels irresponsible, like not doing.
Which means
those things.
what?
Which one?
So hold on. Do we need to wrap, or y'all got time? Y'all go edit around this. So
we got time. We got unlimited.
Who are the three people you admire the most in the world?
Oh man.
Without filtering, just rattle them off.
Okay. Yeah. I don't even.
I have Frank Ocean, I have Will Smith, and a female. I have Beyonce. But yeah.
Okay. And you, Devin?
Shit. I don't think about this very often. No, Miles is absolutely one. That is going to be number one. So yeah, Miles, I would say my mom, and then yeah, my friend Jasmine.
Okay. And when you are most transparent about your fears and anxieties, what do you fear losing the most in moments where you otherwise want to be, as you say, radical?
It is only ever my ability to provide. It's my ability to provide. I can't now, but the future.
To make money?
Do I make any?
No, you're saying, when you say livelihood, I'm asking, there's power in precision. So I'm asking if you're saying by making money.
Yes.
Okay. And you, Devin?
I think, well, actually, can you repeat the question for me one more time?
What do you fear most? The something that Devin said was, after I admire and often think about being radical in a particular way around people being able to speak truth to power, and I acknowledge that there are fears.
Failure for me. I am someone that is afraid of letting others down, letting myself down, and not achieving these goals that I have put place on myself. So mine's definitely fear. In that place.
So I'm gonna submit two things to you, and this is helpful because one of them I hold on to often. I don't know. I have not had the pleasure of meeting your mom or hearing you talk a lot about her, Devin, or Jasmine. But I would venture to say that one of the things that connects Miles, based on how you talked about him, Beyonce, Will Smith, and Frank Ocean, as I have experienced them, is a willingness to be vulnerable and to take the kind of risks that allow you to be free enough to be celebrated in this way. So here, two additional things, right? I'm trying to think of the order to do them. I'll do them first, livelihood, and then failure. One of the ways that white supremacy works is through the trappings of capitalism, which is to suggest that if you play by certain rules, if you dress a certain way, carry your hair a certain way, speak a certain way, don't flip enough tables, right? Like if you operate within these parameters, then you will be rewarded with a salary, a title, a job, a whatever. And for a lot of people, for a long time, that has been true. However, Frank Ocean made his big splash by releasing an album where people wrote pieces about whether or not he was rapping to a man. Mm-hmm. Will Smith was a rapper who benefited from the creative genius and partnership of folks like Quincy Jones and other risk takers and rule breakers to do something that hadn't been done. And we could have an entirely different 4-hour conversation about all of the shit that Beyonce has done to say fuck you and your rules around the ways that you attempt to control Black people, Black women, Black artists, and everything connected to them. Even the way that she refuses to give interviews and decides when and how she's going to comment on shit that she's clearly aware of in the world is a reflection of the kind of disruption that I think you're still seeing as something that is just beyond your reach. Yeah. So hold on to that. And really for me, the thread for me and the people that I would have added on my list is that we celebrate them because they speak truth to power, because they show up in these singular ways where they distance themselves from other people who try to emulate them or do the things that people have been told, right? It's one of the reasons why I fuck with Rihanna as hard as I do, because she does what she wants to do, or at least that's the way that we feel. To go to the point about failure, which is huge for Black people, and I think in particular in the space of this conversation, acknowledging the privilege that comes with this, Black gay boys. right? There's a book Randall Keenan wrote called The Visitation of Spirits, and it's about a young man named Horace who lives in Timms Creek, North Carolina. And for me, it's really important because like the location of it, the spiritual component of it, he talks about necromancy, but it's really about like the responsibility that chosen Black boys have, who are often gay Black boys have, because they are smart enough and uniquely equipped to get out and do things and deliver to the community, right? Like that weight is true and those things are true. And failure is in you not taking the risk, not saying the thing that needs to be said, not living in the privilege that you have inherited. And Dr. King is the perfect person to have articulated this. So I just thought about this in this moment. Today's the 12th. We are having this conversation on, and it's going to mess y'all up in terms of when y'all release this, but we are having this conversation on the anniversary of the Pulse nightclub massacre.
Yep.
5 years ago to this day, I was in the White House with a group of 100 Black and Latinx queer kids who we had invited for the first ever White House summit on African-American LGBTQ youth. That was the second time I thought I was going to lose my job, in part because people were suing the president around trying to get people to appreciate that you shouldn't care about where your students are going to the bathroom, as long as they're not going to the bathroom when you're rubbed. We'll talk about trans violence and control of trans bodies at some other point. But the point is that 5 years ago, we were hosting a summit to remind people that we exist in student form, right? Because some of us come to ourselves early. That we're often missed and erased, right? This was for me that, you know, the 10 years that I spent roughly on Capitol Hill, whenever groups came to lobby for Black issues, we didn't discuss queer possibilities, not queer people, not queer issues. Conversely, whenever HRC or GLSEN came, everybody was almost always white, right? The consequence of that was us centering queer kids in this summit. And we wanted to allow them to be experts, to be celebrated in this process of making recommendations for policy and practice so we could shift stuff. I literally will never forget the feelings of kids who have been kicked out of their homes, told they weren't worthy of anything, let alone dreaming, voguing in the White House as they looked over the place where Barack Obama slept. 5 years ago to this day. All of that was disrupted because the next morning we woke up, Pulse happened.
Yeah.
We were in there. I lost a fraternity brother at Pulse nightclub.
Wow.
Shout out to the Brothers of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated. Just again to talk about intersectionality, right? Like that's not the story that's told now when it's remembered as a white gay thing, right? I remember shortly thereafter being in shared space with Martin Luther King III and asking him what he turned to get over. Because what I'm clear that I'm attempting to say and communicate or be a vessel to communicate is that like none of this shit is easy. But I do believe if we are most thoughtful about how white supremacy works and we don't carry the baggage that white people give us so that they can be supreme in the ways that they lie to themselves about, then we could be much more radical about shifting stuff. And so Dr. King had a sermon called But If Not that I implore you, I'm begging you to read it. And the core, the lesson in the sermon to me as a Kojic child is that each of us Black people, gifted Black people, Black queer people will be challenged at some point in our lives to do something, to say something, to stand in a way that is going to be uncomfortable. It's going to cost you friends. It's going to cost you checks. It might even threaten your life. But you will know in the way that I imagine you already know, because we have come to this a couple of times in this conversation, that you are purposed to do it, that if you don't do it, it won't be done. And what Dr. King says, that if you choose not to do it and live your life, then you might as well have died in that moment. Because each of us is purposed to do something anyway.
Yeah.
Which is to say that, right, I imagine that like there are 10 things that even in quarantine life, I could imagine that we otherwise might have chosen to be doing other than reflecting upon the lot of our lives, right? Du Bois talks about, and it's why I'm getting a PhD, right? Those of us who are privileged enough to be able to do some of these things are required to do them. But the point here again is that, like, you should fear not living up to your fullness. You should fear abdicating the responsibility you have to live up to the crown. Again, for the price that has already been paid. Like, you should fear us not getting to the place that you dream of more than you fear a bag that ain't really yours and that can be replaced anyway. Or this idea that you should be playing small.
Yeah.
I commit to you as a living example. I've had conversations and experiences and moments, swag surfing in the White House, right? Like, things that people would kill for. The thing that matters most is my ability to stand most days when I'm strong enough, literally at the place where my purpose meets my passion. And that's just my place. This is also why I go back to where we started, which is people can watch how I deliver the content. They can copy the hashtags. They can study the whole blueprint. The things that I'm purposed to do are unique to me. And I'm trying to just stay in my lane and honor and support folks like y'all as y'all do what y'all supposed to do, because we all in this together. But I've watched too many of us die a death caused by white supremacy because we are focused on the distractions, the lies, the fairy tales, and the fantasies, to use Kid Fury's line, that don't allow us to show up in the ways that we're supposed to. And so I'm saying to both of you, Devin, the money will come. I promise you that I took a pay cut from teaching to be a fellow with the Congressional Black Caucus. I spent 5 years in DC before Barack Obama was elected president, and nobody in my family could with any depth what I actually did. They were proud of me, to be sure. A lot of them thought I was crazy. I'd already graduated from college, undergrad at least. Like, why I would go for more school was foreign to them. I'm saying to you that most people will never be able to understand the dreams that you dream because you are uniquely equipped to dream them. And similarly, this idea of failure is one that happens most often because we don't take the risk. We sit in the safe space. Both of y'all, all of us have to be. This is why I get so pissed off and thinking about this conversation I had with one of my mentees today, who is a Afro Latinx trans girl, as she describes herself. I think she would say she's a young woman at this point. But it is often the people who have the least who sacrifice the most. And if there's anything I want out of this moment, while people are willing to risk their lives to protest, is for the privileged people to step up and do more. And so I'm saying to y'all as brothers who have like the ability to do this is privilege, right?
Yeah.
Take the risk, push past the fear, and just start fucking shit up.
And that's what we're gonna leave at. We're gonna leave that right there. Where can people follow you at on social media platforms, websites, and things of that nature?
Dangerous question. I'm at Mr. David Johns across all platforms. Mr. and then my name, DAVIDJOHNS. You can use the hashtag Teach the Babies, Let's Get Free, All Black Lives Matter. I use those every day, all day. And the organization, the National Black Justice Coalition, is at NBJC on the Move across platforms, and nbjc.org, nbjc.org online.
And if you all would like to continue the conversation with me and Devin, you can hit us up at our social medias. Mine is my Twitter and Instagram is _Lord Every. So that is _LORDEVERY, but it's spelled Lord Every, but it's Lord Every.
And my Twitter is Free Negro. That's FREENEGREAUX. And my Instagram is Derwin King.
And if you would like to continue this with our podcast information, you can hit us up on our Instagram and Twitter at ThatBlackBoyJoy. And if you would like to send us an email or be a part of the show, you can hit us up at ThatBlackBoyJoyPodcast@gmail.com. I do this so much. once again, thank you for being a part of this episode with us, David.
My pleasure.
Really appreciate this. I think this is something that is like going to be remembered for me personally for a while. And I would love to, still have you a part or, follow up or have other conversations with you, even if it's offline as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, happy to do that.
Thank you.
And with that, we are out, everyone.